This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of having coming in from Seattle and all over the world through the digital platform called the internet, Yarlo, coming in from JMB Fitness. We are going to talk about martial arts. We're going to talk about strong mind and body. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship, and we're going to talk about whatever else we want to. So, Yarlo, welcome to the show.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So, look, you started out, quote unquote, as an athlete, but doing your own sport, as a martial artist, as a kid. Talk about how that kind of, was important to your development and, how it led you to where we are today.
Yeah. So, all the kids, you get into that community center karate, right? Your parents put you in, they're like 12 years old. And I kind of just kept at it, like I started that, then I got into boxing, I wrestled, kickboxing, taekwondo, and then, all that kind of stuff hit hard in the 90s, right? When you had the MMA starting, UFC, and I sort of kind of got into that. So kept going on that, did jujitsu, and it all kind of fit because my parents, they were in healthcare and I knew I wanted to get into that. So I ended up going to physical therapy school too. Right. So all my life,
Gotcha.
I'm like, oh, this, this fitness thing, this performance thing, it just hit me. And then martial arts, I like that way better than, football, basketball, all that kind of stuff was great. But for me, I found my fitting and that kind of stuff. And so that's just what I've been doing. Physical therapy, did a lot of outpatient orthopedic work, sports, athletes, all that kind of stuff. So it all kind of just gelled together,
Yeah. And then when you take a look at, when did you decide, or was it when you were in your teens, that like, hey, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to set my own path. I'm not updating my resume for anybody but myself.
Right. Well, like physical therapy, it's a big part of that too. Like if you didn't want to work in hospitals, right? You didn't want to work in nursing homes. I had a lot of mentors. They're like, you got to start your own clinic or you got to start your own business. And they were the same thing like you said, like they were, the guys that open up their own clinics because they can't work for anybody else, right? They can't, no one's gonna have them. And so I was lucky, had a couple of mentors.
You're a sole entrepreneur. You're sole entrepreneur sometimes because you're unemployable, right?
Yeah, right. But yeah, I was lucky. I had a couple of mentors. They own gym. I had a couple of guys that own gyms. So they're like really helped me out. New guys that own clinics. And so after a bit, I was working on my own. And then I got together with a couple guys and that's how we got GMB Fitness. This was back in the early 2000s. And, people were really just starting to get into like sort of this alternative fitness stuff where we were talking about skills and movement versus, just working out or, gaining muscle, lose fat, that kind of thing. And so we were kind of at that vanguard of, your fitness should really fit what you want out of it, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I got to work out. I got to do this. They're on machines, they're doing stuff, but they weren't, you weren't really feeling it because they're like, well, what am I doing this for? Right. And so we're like, well, skill training really helps people understand what their body's like, getting up and down, moving around. And we all had martial arts background. We all had that kind of thing. So we were actually working out for something, right? Sometimes you ask people, what are you working out for? Like, I don't know. People say it's good for me. Right. And that really doesn't last too long, right? If you don't know what you're working out for, what you're training for, it's really easy to go, well, what the hell am I doing this for? And you kind of just stop. Yeah.
Right. So when did you decide that, one, you could do things locally? Obviously you got a following and, you're an authority on the space. When you started to go digital and say, hey, I could replicate this and I could get other trainers around the world, to basically further and expand your curriculum and programming. Did that seem like a natural extension? Were you kind of concerned at all as an entrepreneur that like, hey, I'm basically like documenting my special sauce? Or are you like, hey, look, I got a lot of conviction for this. It's bulletproof scientifically, let's just
Right.
hit go.
That's a good question. Well, a lot of this started, like I said, I met my partners, Ryan and Andy. We were, doing seminars for different organizations who we met through, right? And this was, again, lots of people like workshops. So you travel around, you're teaching, we're teaching different ways of, again, the alternative movement culture type of thing. This is back in early 2000s. And we actually started out with this kind of yoga-ish program because that's how you sell things, right? You got to, if people didn't get what we were doing, well, they know what yoga is, but it's the same thing, right? You're moving around, right. You're understanding how your body, breath, mind works. And, we were doing a lot of the kind of flow yoga stuff. And you know how that goes. We made DVDs. After a bit, we're like, oh, you can put PDFs online. You can do downloadable videos. And so we started with that. And, that worked out pretty good. And then we got more and more kind of people asking us, well, can you certify us in this kind of stuff? And so we did more seminars, more kind of stuff like that. And they were like, we can only go so many places. And so, yeah, I think it was an organic extension of, well, we can get things out here, but, do we want to be traveling every weekend? We did that for a bit, but yeah, like I said, this is back when you were kind of printing your own DVDs, and doing those kind of spiral bound notebooks type of thing. This was like 2004, 2005, right? And then we're
I used to spend a lot of time in Kinko's.
Right, exactly.
Back in the day, FedEx Kinko's, like
and you know how the
check
trouble.
my email there, print out all these playbooks.
But that's the trouble with it, right? Once you start printing it out, you mess something up. You got to print it again. So, like, the digital landscape is awesome because you're like, well, I figured I want to update this, right? This was back in, remember, what was the name of that stuff? ClickBank, right? These older kind of affiliate things where, oh yeah, you get this PDF, you get these downloadable videos. It was easy to edit your video, upload a new thing, right? And now it's even easier with the streaming, and all right, we can update things. Our
so
company.
How much time do you spend now on working on your digital side of your business or virtual versus actually in person teaching classes or being around people?
Well, for me and our partners, it's like 90% digital, right? What we've done over the last few years, though, is really up our certification programs. And so we got trainers, again, all over the world. They're the ones mostly doing the workshops, right? Or we had kind of a pause that last 2 years or whatever, but, they're the ones, on the ground locally. But also we provide a lot of resources for them to keep in the digital space too, right? All the Zoom classes, all the kind of stuff. We have private communities where we can live stream. That's been huge. People really enjoy the whole live stream classes thing.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So, from a standpoint of, obviously you're reaching a significantly more, volume of people and trainers through COVID. Obviously that was the best way and only way to scale the business.
Right.
In what's your like personal comfort zone of, hey, I'll keep doing this virtual. I'll do classes online, but is there a part of you that needs like physical, social group settings, classes? Like, how do you think about that as like, you might say, hey, look, I got this awesome scalable digital business, but I feel like shit because I don't talk to anybody. I don't leave my house.
Oh yeah. Right? That's
so
huge.
How do you collaborate for yourself?
That's huge. Well, we are starting to do more in-person stuff for sure. Locally, I teach classes and, I teach martial arts, but I also occasionally do a workshop, like I've done hip workshops, shoulder workshops, and that type of thing. You really can't beat in person for, that really hooking somebody, right? Really getting that feedback, immediate feedback to people. And you see them just click. Like, you can get some of that through like digital and live stream. And, we do a lot of live Q&A stuff, right? That kind of really quick interactive things where people could ask questions and you're performing, you're doing all that stuff. But in person, yeah, you can't beat it. You can't beat it.
Yeah. So when you kind of take a look, and this is for other entrepreneurs, love to get into your psyche of, how do you define success? And is it anything that it turns into quantifiable, or do you just say, hey, look, I'm in a good place. I feel good. My business is growing. You're not like, what did we do last month? How many memberships do we sell? How many people
Right.
showed up to this event? How much of it is like, you got a lot of autonomy and freedom, which I do too. I'm probably unemployable by anybody else unless they want me to run the place. Like, I'm not reporting
Right.
to anyone except like a board of directors. I'm assuming you're the same way. At the same time, you kind of set your own criteria for what success looks like and how much time I want to allocate towards it. And if you allocate more time, you probably get more results. But at the same time, like, like there's a law of like diminishing emotional or psychological return. So how do you think about that if you were kind of advising a younger version of yourself?
Yeah, I think that's huge. We talk about this a bunch. So when we first started, we're like, well, what the hell? We didn't know what was going to happen, right? We're like, oh, let's just put it out there. And then, we did good. Then we actually hit a point. It was around 2015, 2016, about 5-6 years into it, where we just jumped up and we're like, oh, what the hell? We really hit it. And, it's the scale thing, just like we were talking about. So we started out with we had 6 people, 10 people in the company. Then we hit a certain point where we're like, whoa, we got to hire more people. And so we got up to 20, 22, 24. But that's that death zone, right? You're too small to really scale up further, and you're too big. So you got all these people we got to manage. And for a couple of years, we're like, okay, we need to keep going. But we hit that thing where all of a sudden we're like, what the hell are we doing now? Now we're trying to manage people. We're trying to do
almost
this.
Like the business took control of you.
Oh yeah, totally. And, you could have seen it coming because everything we're reading, everyone's like, you know what? Once you hit that 20 to 40 mark, you better get the hell out of there, right? You either got to get bigger or you got to figure out a way to get back to smaller. And we're like, oh, we're fine. Right. So what you're saying is it's fully borne out. You're like, well, shit. So after a period of time, we hit have to make some hard choices. We're like, okay, we're going to drop down again. And it's exactly what you're saying is the business starts to run you. And so in terms of success, we always knew we wanted to, one of our things was we got to change the way people look at what fitness means, what exercise means, and make it really meaningful to them. And so that they can continue on and they can get better and not feel like they're just spinning their wheels. We can get better, we're getting older, but we're changing the goalposts, right? We're kind of working towards what really matters for us, whether that's performing better at a particular sport or just, being a good overall person, right? And so that's our metric for success. We see our clients going, you know what? I didn't think I'd be able to do this. And they're doing it, right? They're doing it and they're going to keep doing it for years. Now, you want to keep the business open, right? You got to keep the business open so you can help people. You got to, keep your margin and do all that kind of stuff. But I think you have to decide what your scale is, right? If you want to be big, then you got to go for it. You got to go for it and get bigger and get out of that gray zone. But if you don't, then don't listen to people saying, well, you gotta. Man, I don't know. I know lots of people. I have lots of friends. They're still at 3, 4, 5 people and they're doing great, right? They're living the life they want.
Yeah.
So I think that's a choice.
Yeah. I think there was a big rush, when there's a lot of venture capital deals in the market and Uber and WeWork and Peloton, and everyone's
Right.
like, oh, I got to go get some venture capital money, and I got to go and take this idea and I got to blow it up. And I think people don't fully appreciate what path you need to go down
Oh
if
yeah.
you're going to do that, and what the results, what's the daily, weekly, and monthly, like how does that change? So you're on conference calls late at night, you're putting a board deck together, you're answering questions for people that really don't inherently understand the business and the
Right.
business model. They ask stupid questions because they don't know like the special sauce or how it works.
Right.
And you end up reporting to someone. It's an uncomfortable situation. And then you might spend the next 3 to 5 years to try and buy them out or muzzle them, or just say, I'm not doing this anymore because I didn't really sign up for this.
Right.
I think a lot of people listening to this, take a dose and a second to think through, like, if I want to take on an investment partner, and it's an institutional capital partner, their returns and their sole purpose of getting involved with you is not to get more people to do martial arts, to think holistically, to have, more longevity. It's to make money on the purchase and the sale of the business, and whatever happens during that time, that's great, and we can put it in a press release.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like, I'm looking at the financial statement. I'm not looking at the emotional statement, or like the Mayo Clinic, body scan of my CEO to make sure he's okay or she's okay.
Right.
I'm looking to make money on this, and I'm going to drive it as hard as I can to do it. Having said that, there are better investors than others, but I think people really need to know what they're signing up for. And I'm psyched to hear that you kind of just said, hey, look, my path and one of my tenets or pillars is autonomy and freedom. And anything that goes against that pillar is not acceptable for how I want to roll this out.
Yeah. No, you got it exactly right. I think a lot of times, like you're saying, people get into it, maybe they got a passion for something, but then they start realizing, well, shit, I got to make some money. Everyone's telling me I got to get people investing in me, all that kind of stuff. And then they just get, they're on the ride, right? They're on the ride and they're like, oh shit, how do I get off this thing? And, we've been lucky. We never had to get investment. We kind of just bootstrapped our way up, kept putting money back in the business. Eventually we got, stable. But, I think it's a choice. I mean, it's sort of different, but my brother's in video games. Man, talk about an industry for that. And we have lots of friends, and their thing is, we're going to build a company, we're going to sell it. We know a guy, he's on his 4th company. He's killing it. But I'm like, how long can you do this, man? But he just loved it. So if you kind of get into that, and if that's your thing.
Yeah, well, some people are like serial. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think
the thing that people need to understand is it's not an exit for every company.
Right.
Some people live in the company because they can't get out.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
So if you're in the industry, it's got a lot of buyers.
Right. And, in this kind of health and fitness space, I think it's a little different, because I would think a lot of people who get into it, they got a passion for this. They're not necessarily looking for, that $1 million or, multi-million bucks. Some of them are and whatever, but I think the majority of us are like, we're doing it because we want to help people, right? We've been active. We see the value in doing this for ourselves. So I think that's it. Yeah.
I just hope people, when they look at their own scorecard or look at their own highlight reel, that, the dollars and cents of the business is part of your scorecard, and depending on what percentage you want to make it.
Right.
But getting up every day and being excited about what you're doing, having a relatively lower level of stress, having a good relationship with your investors or stakeholders, is all part of a multi-level rating, and not
totally.
My company's on the top 500 Inc. 500 because you paid and added Inc. 500 magazine.
Right. I think you're right. I mean, it's like you were saying, what did you start out with? Right? Why are you doing this in the first place? Right. And you gotta,
Yeah.
for us, we were like, yeah, I mean, this is our way to help people, but, keep ourselves, not even independent, but just keep ourselves liking it. Like you said, wake up, do our job, not hate ourselves. And, at the end of the day, can we do that?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you one other question, just related to, you got several different businesses that you have listed on your website. Um, as you thought about building the team, or you said you started and then you got up to 23, 24 people. What were some of the most important hires that you made? And if you could resequence who you brought on at what time, like what was the most impactful thing for you, whether it was a skill set you didn't have, whether it was a skill set you had, but maybe there was a better use of your time somewhere else. Because I think a lot of people come to us and say, hey, here's my org chart. I got one or two co-founders, and then I'm going to build this team. But I think there's like a roadmap based on who you are, what you're doing, what the milestones are. So can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I think it's super hard, right? That's a hard question. Everyone's like, well, you got to do the marketing director, right? You got to get somebody in who knows that, the industry. And yeah, is correct. But I think for us, the most important hires were getting our trainers to really interact with our clients. So it's, customer support a lot of times is, outsourced, right? But we put that as our forefront, like, on everyone that's emailing in or commenting on a social post, they got to get answers that are right in line with what we would say, right? And, we would be on it too, but I think that's huge. Like, you got to get this, if you're really client focused, then every interaction with that client has got to work. I think that it seems trite, but especially for something when you're trying to sell, fitness and performance benefits, because people got questions. There's a lot of people out there trying to tell you what to do, right? And so you got a lot of choices. So your first impression is bad, they'll just go somewhere else. In terms of our skill sets and stuff like that, you need somebody that writes good copy. You need somebody that knows how to do an email sequence. You need all of these kind of things. And my business partner, Addie, is great at it. But you can, how many hours in a day you got, right? How many tests can you go out? How many ABs can you do? You need that kind of work. So a marketing team that, kind of understands what you're going for and is able to test things out. I think that's huge, right? If we could have got that going, you talk about sequencing. I think the client support and having that early on would have saved, would have catapulted us a little quicker, I think.
Yeah, gotcha. And then the last question for you is, you said your parents were in the medical field. Is that right?
Yeah, my dad was in pharmacy. My mom was a nurse. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a doctor. Yeah, kids are like that. And I was like,
right.
Once I got going, I was like, man, I don't wanna be a doctor. So I got into physical therapy because you actually work with people for longer than 5 minutes at a time. Yeah.
So did you have any do you have any mentors, maybe like in somebody from like martial arts back in the day that was one of your senseis, or a friend of yours that was like your older sibling, or like who's like your North Star on like, hey, we bounce this off of somebody, or you go to somebody for like, hey, just sanity check what I'm thinking about doing?
Yeah. Well, I had for physical therapy wise, I actually one of the guys that helped me get into PT school, he was an entrepreneur for a long time, owned clinics, and he was really helpful, Michael Poland. And then martial arts wise, my current teacher now, Burton Richardson, he's been in martial arts since, late 70s, schools all over the place. But he was also doing that sort of DVD market, like way before a lot of people. And so it was interesting. I was like, oh yeah, I'm learning how to fight and doing all these things. And then the more I talked to him, I'm like, well, this guy actually knows how to sell things, right? Actually knows how to do business, because martial arts, man, is notorious for you're not making any money at all. right? You're barely keeping the doors, if you can keep the doors
Right.
open, right? But, you know, to have someone that was successful for a long time, actually trying new things, you know, doing the distance learning before people were even thinking about that, and keeping it quality, you know, keeping it quality. So yeah, those two guys, definitely. Mentorship is huge, massive, massive.
Yeah. I think so many entrepreneurs that are listening here, you know, make sure you got some sounding board, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's an accountant, whether it's you know, somebody in your community or even a member that, you know, I usually although I use this term, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. So find somebody who's got more experience than you do and just bounce it off them. You don't have to listen to them all the time, but at least hear them,
Yeah,
you
man.
know?
They've
So
been there, right? They've been there.
love what you're doing, man.
No, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on. And, you know, if anybody says what industry you're in, you can say you're part of the Halo sector.
Halo
And now
sector.
you
I
are
like
a
it.
Halo certified entrepreneur.
I like it. Thanks, Pete.